Hi there. In this video, we'll talk about the nostalgic function in bitKlavier. So to get nostalgic, you press Action, Add Nostalgic, or you can just press N. And you Command, click, drag from the key map to nostalgic to link nostalgic up with everything else we have going on here. And let's open it up and see what happens. So without nostalgic, this is what our keyboard sounds like. Sounds like a keyboard. And then with nostalgic, this is what it sounds like. So what's happening there is that it takes the note that you played and it plays it backwards. It repeats it backwards. And you can see that right here. That's the note repeating backwards. So let's go through the 3 pages of nostalgic and talk about all the fun functions that it has. So starting on this page, note length multiplier. That's pretty much how long the nostalgic repeated, this note that is backwards and repeated lasts for. So if it's at 1, then if I play a note for 2 seconds, it'll be repeated for 2 seconds. 1, 2, 1, 2. If I make it 0.5, and again, you can drag or you can type in a number, make it 0.5, 0.5. Then if I play a note for 2 seconds, it'll only repeat for 1 second. 1, 2, 1. Or if I make it 2, then you guessed it, 2 seconds is 4 seconds. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. My counting might have been a little fast, but you get the idea. 1. Gain is just how loud the backwards note is, the nostalgic note is. So if it's at 1, it's as loud as you played it. If it's lower than 1, then it's quieter. And if it's bigger than 1, then it's louder. That's a simple one. That's a giveaway. Wave distance allows you to cut off the starting point of the note. So we hear that when I play the note, it's repeated backwards all the way swelling up to the attack. So when I play a note, the loudest point is in the beginning, this attack, and then when it's repeated, that loudest point is put at the end. That's why we hear it swelling to be louder. Wave distance allows you to cut that off. So if I drag wave distance over here, then it never reaches the peak. And this number is in milliseconds. Again, you can both write a number, 1,000 for example, or you can drag it, and that allows us to cut it off. So you can hear that if I put it at around 1,000 milliseconds versus 0, that the note swells more at 0 because it's getting the attack point, the loudest point is getting cut off by 1,000 milliseconds, around 1 second. The undertow, well, let's see what that does. So as you can hear, it plays another note. So I play a note, then we get the repeated backwards nostalgic note, and then undertow is another forwards note. So it's pretty much 2 extra things happen when you play a note when you activate the undertow. And this number as well is in milliseconds, so that's how long the undertow lasts for. Here, for example, it's 1,000 milliseconds. You can make it super short. Yeah, you barely notice that. Make it a little longer. There's a little blip. You can make it really long. Cool. Jumping up here, key on reset. That allows you to essentially, when you play one note, so for example, when key on reset isn't clicked, if I play a D, here we gotta make the note length multiplier longer for this. If I play a D, play it a few times, you'll see that multiple Ds are nostalgic. They all were. But if you press key on reset, then every time you play the same note, it starts over. They don't add up. If you play a different note, then they'll add up. But every time you play the same note, it resets, which is a pretty cool function. We will come back to transpositions and use tuning and these friends up here later in the video. So moving on to this page, right at the top here we have hold time and velocity min-max. This is similar to parts of the synchronic function. If you've watched that video or messed around with that, it pretty much messes with parameters of how nostalgic is activated. So hold time means that if I make the minimum a little high, then if I play notes that are only a certain length, that are only this short, then nostalgic won't be activated. Only when I play a note this long, that was 2 notes. Only when I play a note past this point for this length is nostalgic activated. So we can make this a little more dramatic. We're just staccato notes. Nothing happens. But anything else, we get nostalgic. And those are taking so long because the note length multiplier is set to 3.41. You can also bring this way down so that only staccato notes are nostalgic. But long notes are free from that. You can also make the minimum higher than the maximum so that there's a little area of nothing happening. So if I play it just the right amount, then nothing happens. But if I play it shorter than that or longer than that, then we do get the nostalgic function. Velocity min-max is the exact same concept, just with volume as opposed to length of holding the note. So if I set this over here, for example, well, that one was a little bit too, then nothing happens. If I play loud enough, then we get the nostalgic function. Quiet, nothing. And again with this, you can set the minimum or the maximum higher or lower, and you can set the minimum higher than the maximum and get this little fun nothing happening area. Cluster min is the same concept as these two, but it's how many notes you play. So if cluster min is at 3, for example, let's make it 3. Again, you can drag or you can click and write 3. If I play 1 or 2 notes, nostalgic won't be activated. 1 note, nothing's happening. 2 notes, nothing's happening. 3 notes, we got nostalgic. And this goes up to 10, and you can write in a larger number if you want, 11. Anyway, when you set cluster minimum bigger than 1, cluster threshold opens up, and that is that pretty much decides what a cluster is. So, and that was at 4, so nothing happened. Let's make it at 3, and you'll notice that cluster threshold is decided not by when I play the notes on the keyboard, but when I lift them up. Nothing's happening, but watch as I lift them up, how a blue line will appear here. So I lifted that up in time that it counted as a cluster. But if I make the cluster threshold a little lower and I lift them up slower, then nothing will happen because that was considered as 3 separate notes, not as a cluster of 3. But if I do it really quickly, lift them all at the same time, that was under 209 milliseconds. This is in milliseconds. Then it is considered a cluster of 3, and it will be activated. All right, let's go back down to ground zero, bring that somewhere. All right, and move on to the next page. This is a very fun page. ADSR, attack, decay, sustain, release. If you want to learn more about ADSR, there's a lot of information about this online and all over the place, but for the purpose of nostalgic, the most interesting parts of this are the release time of the reverse ADSR, which is the reverse note of nostalgic, the reverse note we get, and the attack time of the undertow, which is that repeated forwards note. Reverse, undertow. Reverse, undertow. So a cool example of how to play with this is, so these are set at 50 right now. That's how they're naturally set. And if we have an undertow of, say, 2,000, around 2,000, and a wave distance of around 50, then this is what a note will sound like. You hear it kind of rebound. It's not as dramatic as if wave distance was at 0, where it's really re-articulated. But you hear a rebound. If we set this to 500, around 500, and set these to 500 as well, then this is what a note will sound like. You barely even notice that there's a new note happening between the reverse note and the undertow note. It almost sounds like one note that gets louder and then it gets softer, which is not how notes, that aren't played with a bow or anything like that happen. So that's a really cool function that you can get with nostalgic. Pretty darn cool. Okay, so we did this page. We took a look at this page. Let's come back to 50 just to be more normal. And then we'll come back here now and look at the things we haven't looked at yet, starting with transpositions. So you'll notice so far when I've played a note, the same note is repeated. Transpositions, you can drag it. A different note is repeated. And you'll see that I dragged it and there are decimal points. And that means this is, for example, 1.64 equally tempered. One, for example, here, let's make it 1, is an equally tempered half step. 1.64 is 1.64 equally tempered half steps. You can drag like this. You can also shift drag, and that gives you only integers, which are notes on our keyboard, which is pretty cool. You can also double click and write in values. I'll write in -1, a half step down. Or you can write clusters. -1, so I want a half step down, a whole step up from the note I played, and a fifth up from the note I played. That's pretty cool. So you can write those in, or what you can do, let's delete that, is control click, add transposition. So I'll point my mouse where I want, here, let me get rid of that. I'll point my mouse where I want a transposition to be, right here, and control click, add transposition. So now I'll get this note and this note, 3.23. So that's another way you can make clusters. You can write them in, or you can do add transposition. You'll notice that when we have our integers here, they're in the equally tempered scale. 4 is a major third. But what if we're using a different tuning and we want that tuning to be reflected in nostalgic? That's what the use tuning function is for. So to use the use tuning function, we have to get out of nostalgic, go to the tuning fork, and connect the tuning fork to nostalgic. So just to give a quick summary of how the tuning fork works, there's a different video on this that you should totally watch, but just a quick idea. Let me get rid of nostalgic so it's easier to explain. So normally we're in equal temperament, right? But there are many different tunings. All these guys, all those guys, all these guys, lots of tunings. So for example, let's look at utonal. Sounds very different from equal temperament. This is a major C major triad in equal temperament, and in utonal, oh boy, that's different. So we're in utonal tuning now. Let's come back to nostalgic. See, utonal. That's a C major triad. Sure doesn't sound like one. And let's say I want to have a C major triad be a major triad be represented in the transpositions function of nostalgic. So that would be 0, 4, major 7th, and 7, which is a perfect 5th. So I should play a C and I should get a major triad. But that sounded like an equally tempered major triad, not like a utonal one. So if I press use tuning, then nothing happened. Nothing happened because I wasn't connected. I have to connect the tuning fork to nostalgic. Here we go. There we go. That's the funky C major chord. That's our beautiful utonal C major chord. Without that, just equally tempered. So that's a very cool function. Use tuning here. Let's. So we don't want to be in utonal for the rest of this video because our ears will go crazy. Okay. Oh boy. All right. No more major triads for you. Cool. Okay. The last section of this video and the last part of nostalgic is this right here: note length versus synchronic sync key down and synchronic sync key up. This refers to when you both have nostalgic and synchronic in your gallery. So let's get synchronic going. Connect it to this bad boy and connect synchronic to that bad boy. So let's see what happens when we just have nostalgic and synchronic on the same gallery. Bring that down. Okay. And let's give ourselves an undertow so we can hear the nostalgic better. You'll hear that nostalgic is peaking not in sync with synchronic. It's peaking from when I played, from when I let go of the note. But if you want your nostalgic to peak in sync with synchronic, you can press synchronic sync key down or synchronic sync key up. So let's press key down and see what happens. You'll hear it peaks right in sync with synchronic. Instead of having the note length multiplier, though, with synchronic sync, we have beats to skip. So right now, I'll play a note, and one beat after, it'll peak. If I wanted to peak 2 beats after, I make it 1 beat to skip. 1, 2, like that. And you'll notice with synchronic sync key down, nostalgic begins when I press the key down, but with synchronic sync key up, you guessed it, nostalgic begins when I lift the key up. So let's listen to that. Nothing's happening. Only when I lifted the note up did we get a sound. And there you go. We went through this beautiful page, and this beautiful page, and this beautiful page. We looked at tuning. What a journey we've been on. We're left with this geometric shape. Thanks so much for listening. See you next time.